Welcome back to Crimson Cast. Galen, Clavio, Scott Caulfield joining you. Wednesday, November 26th, we were getting some desperate pleas on social media. Content, Scott. People got driving to do.
Turkey content.
People got in-laws to avoid. We are here to provide you all with some holiday content. It's feast week in basketball. It's rivalry week in football. This is the crossroads of our content lives, Scott, and we're happy to be here. I'm happy to have some time here Wednesday morning. A lot to talk about. We're going to talk primarily basketball on this episode, but it's great to see you. You're back. I saw you last night. You were at the basketball game with your son. I was there with my oldest daughter. It was a fun time, and it feels like we're right back in the apex of things. Scott, I'm excited.
It is. It's funny you mentioned last night's game and Thanksgiving. Big shout out to Jeremy Gray, our friend who's now doing the PA. Like he's having so much fun with that. Like if you haven't gone to a game, he has fun with the about to stop selling beer line. He's always like, oh, don't boo me, like it's coming. But last night was like a joke. It's like, you're about to spend 4 days with your extended family, like you need that last drink. And it's like, this is great PA jokes. Like this is great. Assembly Hall, breathing life back into it. So Jeremy, like chef's kiss, well done.
I think other than replacing Don Fisher as the voice of IU athletics, replacing Chuck Crabb as the voice of Assembly Hall, probably the most unenviable task that one could have. And yet Jeremy has done an amazing job of making that uniquely his own and staying in the pocket. He's still got some little Chuck Crabbisms, but it's definitely Jeremy Gray on the PA. And I completely agree. I said on Twitter last night, we need like a 4 CD set of all of his one-liners from the alcohol sales will end at the 10-minute mark of the second half.
The supercut of the entire season of alcohol sales will end. And I mean, I guess, you know what? Somebody do this and send it to us. Like you should record that and do that at Thanksgiving when the topics, your uncle's getting too much into politics or whatever. You just be like, alcohol sales are done. Just play it on your phone. Alcohol sales are done at this Thanksgiving table in 2 minutes. Like just to bring it back, like use Jeremy to help you bring people back together.
Yeah, no, cutting off Aunt Caroline at like the 3 o'clock mark on
that sounds personal. Sounds like you have that.
I do not have an Aunt Caroline. I'm just saying there may be some utility in that.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. So anyway, we obviously want to talk some IU basketball. We're going to talk IU football, I think, a little later this week, maybe later today. Depends on how Scott and I are feeling about things. But before we do that, couple of things, not even getting to the sponsor reads. On the football front, wanted to send a huge congratulations and thank you and a bit of sorrow out as Taylor Lehman of Bite Size Bison announced today that he's wrapping up Bite Size Bison as a regular publication here within the next few weeks. This is a rough one. It's a small fraternity. The number of people that have been covering IU football seriously and consistently over the course of time. And, when Taylor launched Bite Size Bison a few years ago, it was great because, we had lost Punt John Punt, which was kind of the statistical advanced analytics hub of IU football coverage there for several years. Taylor leapt in and didn't just fill the void, but really expanded upon it and really helped to generate a level of seriousness and depth to IU football coverage that I know you and I enjoyed greatly, and I know a ton of other people out there did as well. Taylor has got a new job. He just graduated with his master's degree. He's got to kind of move forward to more adult pursuits, I guess you
can say that. I mean, really, the real reason was his models only could accept so many good stats, and like his model was like, whoa, like 200 yards a game, 3 games in a row. Like my model can't. I didn't plan for this. Like I only planned to be losing and negative yards. Like, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's been great. We've had Taylor on so many times, and it's because his work's awesome. The stats have been amazing, and it's allowed us to understand things about IU football that were not readily apparent, and oftentimes we just weren't quite aware of all the things that were going on. Not just with what was going on in the field of play, but how that measured up across the country, how IU's recruits were doing and what sorts of talent they were bringing in from elsewhere in a unstable and unfamiliar landscape with the transfer portal, and certainly with Cignetti bringing his whole coaching staff and method of doing things to town, really helped us over the course of the last 2 seasons, especially to understand exactly how monumental IU football performance has become. So Taylor, the great thing is Taylor, it's not like he's not dead. He's still around. We're still going to be talking IU football with him, hopefully on occasion. But just wanted to say thank you to Taylor and Bite Size Bison for what they did for IU football coverage here for the last few years, and looking forward to hopefully seeing him contribute in the future in some way. But a big salute to him and all the support that he's provided Crimson Cast in particular over the course of the last few years in coming on and helping us to enhance our own football coverage.
No, completely agree. Couldn't say it better. It's a bummer because the IU football landscape needs not just Taylor, but him plus 25 more. Like we're always looking for more and better, good voices to look at things. So it's totally get it, man. Life takes over, and you get a job, and like things take time. And these are all kind of pursuits of love. You know, none of us are getting paid. This is none of our full-time jobs. So I always totally understand it when somebody's like, look, life's gotten kids, job, whatever. Totally get it. I'm not sure why we're still cracking at this, but you know, it's a bummer because for as good as the IU athletic space is, and for as well represented as it is when we go, you know, you and I went to Vegas a couple years ago for that IU Arizona game in the kind of the middle of the woods scenario when vibes were not awesome. It's like we still had more fans in Arizona. It's like IU fans are there. They show up, as Isaiah Thomas would say, they show up and they show out. But it's like online, it's like we still don't have a great ecosystem yet of a lot of great voices. So it's great when one pops up and really has a unique way of looking at things like Taylor did. And it's also a bummer when they have other things and they can't do it. So Taylor, you will be missed, but yeah, you're not dead. So yeah, come hang out anytime.
Also, just as we move forward here, let's go on to continuing to talk about different aspects of IU football and basketball. I guess the one thing I'll say to kind of close this off, I mean, Taylor had a background in reporting on not just IU football, but on Ohio State football as well. One of the things that I always try to encourage people to do is if you think you've got a unique skill set or a real deep level of insight, create some content. This is what I always tell my students.
Yeah.
This is the time to be doing this. This is the time to go out and create something and fill a void within the landscape. It's been fun this year watching all of these smaller content creators start to create things around IU football. And that's certainly a void that, still, I think that there's a lot more to come from the people that are out there that have a vision about what coverage should be. I look around at the football coverage at other schools, and there's just a ton of people covering it. And it's still a relatively small community here within the IU football coverage community. And I look forward to the next wave of creators that are going to be coming out, and whether it's writing or podcasting or video or some combination therein. I still think there's a lot of stories to be told and a lot of insights to be gleaned from people who follow this stuff closely. So, I think Bite Size Bison, above all else, really demonstrated that you could launch something, and if you were consistent with it and really put your heart and soul into it, it could become something, really exciting, really influential, and really important to fans. Because, there's so many fans, I think, of IU football that don't realize how much good stuff is out there. We have people find our stuff every day that have never heard of it before, and we've been around for a while, Scott. So
we have gray hairs.
Well, yes, we now have gray hair. So it's one of those deals where I'm really looking forward to seeing as IU football continues to be a big deal, and it will be a big deal moving forward for a long time. I'm looking forward to more people coming forward and having some fascinating things to say and some great stories to write. So
no, I completely agree. It's something people ask me all the time about the podcast. It's like part of the reason is just we just kind of did it and you start doing it. And I think it's Ben Thompson with Stratechery that has it's a 99-1 rule that of content that's out there, 90% of people consume it, 9% remix it, and 1% create it. So to your point, if you have an idea and you think it's worth it, just start doing it. Be that 1%. I think so many people, it's just that hurdle of getting it. And then it's just like, just start doing it and do it. And it's like, it's not going to hit right away, but just keep plugging away. And if you do have a good voice and you do have a good angle at things, like you'll find your water will find its level, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get going with the bulk of the show, just a reminder, we are brought to you by Homefield Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, softest fabrics, the coolest designs. They got the Black Friday sale going on right now, Scott, 30% off the whole store. We're already starting to see stocks getting depleted, but there's still some great stuff on homefieldapparel.com. Go check them out, and you'll find so much IU stuff. They've released so much new IU stuff. We got the flying IU stuff. We've got the new Game Breaker jacket. We've got they had an old oaken bucket, like ceremonial T-shirt that they just released yesterday as part of their rivalry collection. All of this available to you. So go to homefieldapparel.com.
Griffin Gonzalez last night at the game was wearing the really sick IU varsity jacket. I might have gotten that. And then my son, James, at the game was like, it's like he's putting a pitch in for Christmas. It's like, I really like that jacket with the Indiana script on the back. And I'm like, all right, that's home field. Like I know where to get that.
Yep. So check them out, homefieldapparel.com. You can buy homefieldapparel.com apparel at Tracks on Kirkwood. You can also buy it in the IU store and the bookstore. It's all over the place. Look for Homefield Apparel on the tag. Be sure to pick something up today. And reminder, also brought to you by Posh Hotel Bloomington on Kirkwood Avenue, the finest in luxury accommodations in Bloomington. We've had people say that they're staying there during the conference championship game week as opposed to going up and watching the game in Indianapolis. And we've had people already
go.
Yeah, it's the place to go. So check them out. Kirkwood and Washington, go to poshhotelbloomington.com. You can check out all their fine accommodations there. Scott, let's go ahead and dive in. You and I were both at basketball last night. Indiana picking up a pretty impressive and overall fairly dominant victory in that game as they take on the Kansas State Wildcats. Not a traditional matchup between Indiana and Kansas State, but still nice to see. 86-69. The final score in this game pushes Indiana's record to 6-0. They came into the game ranked in both polls, which I'm not sure if there were a ton of people that had Indiana being ranked in both polls before Thanksgiving on their bingo cards for this year, but they were. And the Hoosiers had a very uneven game at times, and there were some reasons for that. But overall, a 17-point victory against a power conference opponent, and yet another game where Indiana didn't just perform well on offense, but performed really well on defense. And the Hoosiers, they're a fascinating team that we're still getting to know, Scott. But I want you and I talked about 3 weeks ago about how we had no idea what to expect out of this team. I still don't think we know what the ceiling of this team really is, or the floor for that matter, when it comes to Big Ten play. But we have a little bit of a better idea of who the players are, how their personalities work, and what we might expect to see out of them over the course of this upcoming year. I want to get your impressions now, having seen them in person and having taken several games in. Where are you at right now with this IU team?
I love this team. This team's fun to watch. They're a good time, very high level. So my son and I actually went to Chicago also. I meant to do a VIP video. I didn't, about that trip. That was interesting, going up to United Center. Talked to a lot of fans there, which I think are kind of interesting. The traveling fans, like not the Bloomington fans going to that game. It's a really interesting time for IU basketball, because I'm going to speak for myself, but I think I do fit a lot of other people in this category. Like, this is my first time back at Assembly Hall this year for this game, was at United Center. But it's like, I'm realizing how disconnected I really was the last couple of years. Like, I was still going to games. We were podcasting. I was talking about it, keeping up with it. But it's like, I went there and it's like, man, this is fun again. And it's almost like I've just kind of washed away the last 8 years. And I'm not going to relitigate. We're not here to talk about that. But I think a lot of fans are like that as well. Like, a lot of people I talk to United Center were kind of like, hey, I'm giving this a shot. Like, this is kind of interesting. It's like, oh, like, that game, Tom Crean was the color announcer. It's like, oh, there's Tom Crean. Like, hey, Tom Crean, he coached here. It's like, it's almost like everyone, it's almost like there's been a 10-year gap since the last Woodson era, and everybody's like just kind of checking back in. It's like all the old animosity feels like it's all just gone. It's washed away. It's like, this is so new and fresh. Everybody feels like they're coming in and just like, all right, well, this is fun. This is interesting. Just like kind of plugging into a new team that you don't know. It's like, I'm a Bears fan now. It's like, oh, there's Ditka. Like, no, he's not alive. But it's like, I don't, I don't know. I don't know any of the history of it, but I think a lot of people are like that.
Yeah.
But this team is just a lot of fun. I joked to you last night. I'm trying this idea out. This team reminds me of like a golden retriever in that it's fun. It's a great time. You can throw the ball and keep going. It's always happy. It's wagging its tail. Like it's gonna make a lot of dumb mistakes at times, and like a lot of turnovers, and it's gonna knock some stuff off the table and just kind of be wagging its tail and be happy. Like that is how I view this team. Is that you see the effort, you see the way they're going to play. It's a lot of fun. You definitely, I see where like there's going to be some times in games and some games where it's just like, well, that didn't go well. And you saw it for part of the game last night. You know, it was great. And then we weren't hitting threes, and then we're making a lot of fouls. It's like, oh, this is not going great. But I again, not relitigating the past, even when it wasn't going great, you still felt like the team was playing really hard. You liked the way, felt like there was a, good subbing pattern. Like I've really been enamored by this team. And I think that this team is going to accomplish its goal this season of, in my mind, two things. Like, making the tournament would be one, but really, I think just rebuilding that bond with the fan base and becoming a team that people really enjoy going to and watching. And like my son's there, just like, and again, he's 12. I know he's about to turn 13. He's 12. So he's in the Steph Curry world, like all the way. So he loves the Tucker DeVries pull up threes from way too far out. But, he's like, this team is fun to watch. I really like it. And I'll just end on this. It was fun. Like we've been doing it for years, man. But like the under 8 timeout, James is excited. We get up, we clap, and it's like, that was fun. It's like, it's not like I didn't know it was coming. I've done it for 30 years of my life, but that's the only way I can put it is like, this is the first time in 8 years I've been like, that was fun. Like I had a good time doing that. And I think bearing the lead here is you had a Kansas State team come in that was 51st in KenPom. You had the nation's #1 leading scorer, one of the top 2 or 3 scorers in Haggerty. And it's like you beat them. You basically had them held back most of the game. You're up by 20. When things weren't going well, you were still up by double digits most of that time, and it got a little bit hairy. But how often can we say that we've been able to do that? Like that's all of this fun talk. I will kind of distill down to like, you just beat a pretty good team that probably will make the tournament, that has a really elite scorer, and you kind of held them at bay most of the game. And I would say, and your leading scorer didn't play well, and Tucker DeVries, like there's a lot of signs pointing, a lot of arrows pointing up, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. I think the point you made about restoring the joy, I guess, is probably the most important thing that Indiana basketball can do this year. And I had a little short that I put out on Instagram and YouTube the other day. I guess it was yesterday, where I was like, there's been some criticism of this IU team over the last couple of games. And I think so much of that really can be connected straight back to the fact that this team hasn't really played together ever. And it's also a group of players who really don't have power conference experience.
Right.
I mean, Connor Enright a little bit, at DePaul, not really. And I guess about a quarter of a season for Tucker DeVries at West Virginia. But this is a roster that
he really wasn't playing the conference schedule.
Yeah. Sam Alexis got a little bit of run at Florida, and then he got injured. This is really a mid-major level roster in terms of the experience. Now, the guys, I think, have the talent to play at this level, and I think we're starting to see them rounding into shape and understanding what the level of consistency and effort has to be to work at this level. This is a talented group of players, though. It's a fun group of players. It's a group of players that clearly plays hard. And just that level of caring and exhibiting it on the floor in a way that is manifested through effort is something that I have heard many people directly comment on as saying, wow, this is excellent. This is what I want to see. This is making me get excited about Indiana basketball again. Last night, Connor Enright,
he earned a lot of fans last night, just the way he played.
His defense on PJ Haggerty, who, as you mentioned, like this is a guy who was averaging 28 points a game, a guy who did not have many bad games, had a few, but not many bad games last year from an offensive perspective, really held him in check. And he's diving on the floor. He's a pest, but IU fans have always rallied around those types of players, and we just haven't had that. Yeah, we haven't had that many types of those players here over the course of the last 9 years. And
I left that game already excited to see his game against Braden Smith. I'm like, that's going to be fun. Like that's going to be pest on pest crime. Like that's going to be wild.
And this is where I think this is where this season and this team are hard to really get to put into context. I think for fans is difficult. Now, some fans are just like completely over everything that happened over the course of the last couple of coaching tenures, and I certainly understand that perspective. And as podcasters, I think sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of just being like, wow, everything's fun now and everything sucked before. It's never been quite that simple.
Right.
You've had teams and players that have played hard. Those all kind of get lost in the wash of how things ended.
Yeah.
Both Archie and with Woodson. But already, I think, we heard from Darian DeVries this offseason about how his whole goal was he wanted people to walk out of Assembly Hall, win or lose, and say that team played hard, that team cared, that team was really focused on victory, and whatever mistakes they made, their effort level overcame that, and that's already, I feel like, what you're getting.
Well, and your point is right. Like, I'm not saying guys didn't try hard. Like, it does get lost in the wash. But even just like listening to his post game with Don Fisher last night, DeVries was like, "Hey, Fish, like you totally radio jobbed me." Like, I guess in their radio that their interview this week, he was talking about how like the team hasn't had a lot of turnovers. Like we had 17 turnovers. Like Fisher, you can't talk about it anymore. Like, you're not allowed to say anything. It's like it's just there's a part of like kind of fun. It's like this is like a little bit of levity with all of this as well.
Yeah, no, there's so many things about the team that are that's I think you've got to really acknowledge as a fan if you're paying attention. But that effort intensity piece is so important. And I think like when you talk about the golden retriever aspect to the team, where it's like it's fun, it feels like a group that's going to contribute to what people would view as the positive aspects of Indiana football Indiana basketball in their own minds. There's a lot of parallels there on the football front. Like when you think about why people have reacted so well to IU football, yes, the winning has helped.
Right.
But you think about last year, the team making a point to go over and celebrate with the students after games, and the team, really exhibiting pride in being an Indiana football player and wearing the uniform. And I think that there has been a perception, rightly or wrongly, that hasn't quite been the case with basketball, and that's been a longstanding issue. And it does feel like there's a real commitment with this group to trying to exhibit that. It's not just about whatever you feel internally, it's about how you're exhibiting it outwardly, and the fact that fans do react to that. And look, everybody always talks about how, well, the key to an IU basketball fan's heart is through shooting the ball well. While true, I'd actually argue that the real way to an IU fan's heart is playing good, solid, aggressive, enthusiastic defense. And this team has done that so far at a level that I don't think people are really paying attention to. It was getting some talk on Twitter last night. This team through 6 games, and keep in mind it's an aggregate of a little bit of last year and a little bit of this year so far, but through 6 games, this team is 15th in KenPom in adjusted defensive efficiency. That's huge for a team or a program that through 2 coaches that seem to pride themselves on certain levels of defensive play has never really gotten to those levels. And you think about what Indiana was able to do, like on an unadjusted perspective against Kansas State last night, they held them to 0.91 points per possession. And as we've always talked about on this show, the points per possession thing, well, you have to adjust it for opponent, but that's a real good measure of how good a team is playing. And Indiana thus far has done an excellent job of not just playing good defense, but really playing like almost like a strangulation level defense against the teams that they played so far. Like only one team, and it was Milwaukee, scored on an adjusted points per possession basis above 100. And Kansas State last night, if you adjust it to how they normally score, was at 0.86 points per possession. Like that's awesome. They hold Kansas State last night to what was it? Something like 43% from 2, 40% from 3, and they turned them over a ton. They turned the ball over 19 times last night, and a lot of that was just Indiana pressuring them and causing problems. That is going to endear them quite a bit to this IU fan base. And I think one of the big questions we had overall was, when there are nights where this team isn't shooting well,
right,
will they be able to sustain? And what will sustain on nights when they're not shooting well is their defensive approach. And I think thus far, still early, they've shown that they will have the juice defensively to get through those rough patches where their shots aren't going in.
Yeah, I mean, already the thing that I'm most surprised at, something you and I have talked about ad nauseum, is like, if you want to be a good team in college basketball, you need to have a good adjusted offense and adjusted defense in KenPom. You just need to have a good offense and a good defense. And normally the teams that are in the Final Four, they're in the top 20 in those numbers. You know, right now we're 38th in adjusted offense and 15th in adjusted defense. To give you some clarity, like, those are both under 40. That's how math works. The last time we had an adjusted offense and adjusted defense under 40 was in 2013. That was the Tom Crean team that went, number 1 ranked, had a really good season. Mike Woodson flirted with it in 2023. They were 28th in offense, 45th in defense. So it wasn't awful, but the rest of IU basketball since then, history is littered with, like, there are some teams that are like 25th in offense and 105th on defense, or vice versa. It's like you could not get the stabilization right. Now, small sample size. It takes into account some numbers from last year, and we haven't played as tough an opponent. But what I would say is, it does, this is everything you said, is also, there's a flip side to this as well. It's a team that hasn't played together, that's going to coalesce, and you're already seeing them on offense getting a little more comfortable, getting to the right places. And you're seeing, last night, I saw some great stuff on defense where you saw them helping in better ways, and like, they understand who can handle on their own, who doesn't need help, who does. You're starting to see the fouls start to come down a little bit. Last night there was a lot of turnovers. You figure work on that, but I mean, it's a team that is a work in progress.
Yeah.
That is getting better. But the thing that I like is, they had 2 kind of big games in this early stretch, and that was Marquette and Kansas State. And they beat the hell out of Marquette. I mean, they were up by 25 in most of that game. And, they really had a huge margin of victory against K-State. I mean, a couple of threes go down. It's probably a 20-point win, but it's still a double-digit win. So your 2 kind of big games, you showed up and you did really well.
Well, and look, I will say, I think we'll probably look back on both of these teams. I don't think either of them is likely to make the NCAA tournament, because you look at Marquette. Marquette's already lost 3 games. Yeah. And I mean, Kansas State will probably be right on the bubble. They're projected to go 18-13, 8-10. I think they're a fascinating team in that they're just not very good defensively, but you still have to take advantage of that. And I look at these as really intelligently scheduled ramp-up games for Indiana, where obviously everybody knows the big games, the Louisville game in a few weeks or a couple weeks, and then obviously the Kentucky game a week after that, are going to be the measuring sticks, not just because it's Louisville and Kentucky, but also because those are away from Assembly Hall. You get Louisville and Gainbridge. You got to go to Rupp to play Kentucky. I don't know if Indiana is going to be necessarily capable of winning both of those games. What we've seen so far tells me that they are at least on the way to being ready to play and be competitive in those games. And I think it's certainly possible that they could win either or both. They're not an overwhelming underdog in either one. They're currently a 4-point underdog on a neutral floor to Louisville. They're currently a 7-point underdog on the road at Kentucky. And then you look at Big Ten play, and the Big Ten looks very good. There are not a ton of teams that you'll look at on Indiana's schedule and say those teams are not good.
And they have a nice ramp up where they could be 5-0 going into that game on the road at Michigan State.
They get Minnesota and Penn State, who are 2 of the lesser lights, and then they get Washington, Maryland, and Nebraska, all of whom struggled a bit. And then, of course, they get into the meat of the schedule, which is pretty meaty,
right?
Between Michigan State, Iowa, Michigan, Purdue, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin. I mean, they've got all of those teams.
It just doesn't end after that.
Yeah, it just keeps going on. But the effort and intensity levels that we see from this team, I think, will carry over. And what I like is that this team can, on any given night, shoot the hell out of the basketball, and makes it very hard for opponents to shoot. Indiana right now is 6th in the country in 2-point field goal percentage for their opponents. They're holding their opponents under 40% from two. They're 10th in the country in defensive effective field goal percentage. They're holding their opponents to 41.8% effective field goal percentage. Like, those are really good numbers. Will they stay that high? Probably not. But will they stay in the top 20, top 25 of those ranges? I think it's entirely possible. And this is where.
Well, and real quick, can I just hit on one point there?
Yeah.
Like, again, the level of opponent needs to be factored in, but it's just, the game against Marquette, they did shoot well to start the game, and that ended the game early. I mean, you had a 95% chance of winning in the first half. They were up 39-27, and they just 42-30 at one point because they were Tucker DeVries was shooting the ball really well. I would say the same thing with last night. At Kansas State, they were up 20-4 to start the game. And then they missed 2 or 3 threes. And that could have been literally you hit a couple more shots. You're up 30-4. The games, you've just landed a haymaker, the likes of which we just haven't seen this team be able to do. We're used to seeing other teams go on runs like that. But to your point, I mean, there's a world where, you just come out like Tucker DeVries is hot or, Wilkerson's hot. It's like they hit 2 or a couple of threes, make 2 stops, and suddenly you're up 12-2 on Purdue. It's like that could happen. Now, that Purdue is a team that'll make a comeback, but we haven't seen that in 7 or 8 years, a team that has that ability to just land a really strong punch to start, in the middle of a game.
Well, this was always the big concern with the way that Woodson wanted to play offense and the way that Archie's teams played offense, was that they just scored and played offense at such a deliberate pace. In Archie's case, the pacing was slow. In Woodson's case, everything was predicated on getting the ball into the post. And you're just not going to blow a lot of teams out of the water that way. And it tended to lead to swoons, like we saw last night, to be fair.
Right.
Indiana goes on an 11-0 run, gets that 20-4 lead, and then surrender. Well, basically nobody scores for about 3 minutes.
Right.
And then Kansas State goes on a 16-2 run, which got pretty awkward in the hall there for a while. At one point it's 24-22,
right,
and 26-24, and you're like, well, not what I was hoping.
Right.
And look, Kansas State deserves credit. They threw a different defensive look out there that really seemed to stymie IU for about 10 minutes. But then Indiana was able to go on an 18-3 run that spanned the end of the first and beginning of the second halves. They got there through not just shooting, but driving the basketball, really being aggressive on offense, and then turning around and being aggressive on defense. And that spurt ability, to quote Jay Billis, is something that has just been lacking in IU basketball for a while. Tom Crean's teams had it, and that was always the best part of Tom Crean's teams, was that ability to kind of go on these runs that the other team couldn't stop. And that allows you to sustain when you get these gaps when you're not hitting. And look, ultimately, a lot of this comes down to how are the individual players operating on the floor. And, you mentioned it earlier, Tucker DeVries, who has been amazing offensively in a lot of games so far, was not amazing in that game. We saw that in the Marquette game where he had the first half of a lifetime, and then essentially between fouls and just the attention being elsewhere, didn't really play that well offensively in the second half. In this game, it was Reed Bailey, who struggled at the beginning and then really picked up steam in that second half and ended up as the leading scorer for Indiana in this game, 21 points. You look at a guy like Tatum Conaway, who had 19 points, turned the ball over a bunch in this game, but also was such a spark plug offensively. So they're able to step in and play at a high level offensively when DeVries doesn't have a great game. Lamar Wilkerson has a relatively quiet game, as quiet as one can be when you go 4 for 7 from the 3-point line. But by his standards, it felt like a quieter game. And Indiana was fine. They get a great contribution off the bench from Trent Sisley. They get good minutes for the most part out of Sam Alexis. They were able to sustain, though, not getting a great high-level point performance out of their star in DeVries or their other star in Wilkerson. And they didn't even really get that much out of the rest of their bench. Like Nick Dorn struggled. Josiah Miles barely played. And it was okay because even with the 7 guys that did contribute, they got a collective effort, both offensively and defensively. That kind of complementary basketball just feels like a breath of fresh air. Whereas in previous years, if the star was having trouble, it was not a foregone conclusion that you were going to get other people stepping up. And I do think that that's made a big difference just in terms of the outlook on what IU can be. It's not about stopping one person. And I think we're seeing now that other people can step up as needed.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've had that next man up mentality where it's not just Tucker DeVries. Although I will say this with Tucker DeVries, we're what, 6 games in, so a fifth of the way through the season. He's 21 of 49 from 3 for 42%. So he shot 53s in 6 games.
Yeah.
That puts him on pace to shoot 253s this season. Do you know the last time we had somebody shoot over 200 threes in a season? I just was kind of plugging through the numbers. There's some wild seasons through there, but
is it James Blackman Jr.?
Oh my God, you're so good. Yes, it was James Blackman Jr.
I didn't think I was going to get that.
Yeah, in 2017, he shot 215 threes. That was the last time. Everybody, 1 year in 2021, Archie only had 1 player shoot over 100 threes in the season. That was Al Durham. There's a year where it's like Archie's like barely has anybody to 100. There was 1 year, it's like 180. It's like, who is that? It's like, oh, that was Devontae Green. It's like Devontae Green cannot be held down. Like, he cannot be held down by any coach. I'm getting my threes. But you're going to have multiple guys on this team shoot over 100 threes. Maybe a couple guys get to 200 threes. And that's what I saw as a little bit different with this team that I've seen in previous years, is when those swoons would come for the team IU in previous years. It's like they just couldn't get a good shot, or they couldn't get a shot off, or they were making a turnover or something. During that run where Kansas State went on that 18-2 run, Tucker DeVries missed a couple of really good threes. That's what I think is different, is like, and that's just, hey man, it's a good shot. Like, not every shot's going to go down, but he was mostly open. There was a couple of other, I think, a couple other shots that were like good threes that were missed. That's just going to happen. But to me, it's like, I feel better with that than where we were, where the swoons would come, because it's like, we're not even getting a shot, or it's like we're getting a really bad contested shot where like that shot is not going to go in most of the time.
Yeah, no. And look, it was, in terms of effective field goal percentage last night, this was not nearly as good as the Marquette or Milwaukee or Alabama A&M games, where they, all 3 of those games, they scored close to 100 points or over 100 points, but it was almost as good. And what was interesting about last night was, we are seeing the offensive rebounding percentage. It's not the disaster that people thought it would be. A lot of people have been like, well, there's no size, there's no consistency in terms of who's going to be in the post. They're going to get out rebounded on both ends of the floor. Hasn't really been the case so far. Everybody has talked about where they're really going to run into trouble when they run into taller teams. And I was like, there's
not a lot of taller teams out there.
Or not necessarily how rebounding works. And look, again, one of the big physical aspects of this team that I think has been undersold is, yeah, they don't really have a key post presence, or a guy that's a rim protector in the traditional sense, but they've got a lot of interchangeable parts in terms of a lot of guys who are 6'5" through 6'8", who can switch, who are going to be in the general vicinity of rebounds. And a lot of it is just effort. As we saw with Reed Bailey, like, he was struggling to grab rebounds, and then he started asserting himself and suddenly was grabbing rebounds that were turning directly into offense for Indiana as the game went along yesterday. So look, again, I'm not predicting this team's going to go undefeated or make a Final Four, but I do think that there's a lot to like about what we've seen so far. The mentality is going to be the key for this team. What is going to win them games is their attitude and their effort and their intensity. And that really does come down to mentality and how they approach things. And where they've swooned so far, where they've had their troubles, I think it's when they've gotten away from that mentality. It's really about trying to figure out a way to keep that locked in for 40 minutes. And it feels like Darian DeVries understands what buttons to push, at least thus far, to get his team into that mode. I'm really fascinated to see how this develops. There's still some things they need to clean up, Scott. They're still fouling too much. Part of that is the officiating, which sucks, which I'm going to talk about here a little bit. But there's some dumb fouls. There's some reaches that you don't like to see. Tucker DeVries has got to do a better job of not throwing his body in front of players, because he's going to get called for fouls like we keep seeing officials do it. Sam Alexis, I think, has got a similar problem. And those are 2 really key players for Indiana that are going to have to be on the floor. But I think those are the types of things that can be cleaned up. And a lot of it is, I think, just continually adjusting to the level of basketball that everybody's playing at right now, which is the power conference level. If they can get those things cleaned up and they can figure out a way to make that mentality and that effort level last for the entire 40 minutes instead of just for 10 minutes here, 8 minutes there, this team will be dangerous and difficult to play against. And while they may not have the top end talent of the Houstons and the Tennessees and some of the top teams across the country, their shooting ability and their ability to be really, really hard to play against defensively is going to be a real asset for them throughout the course of the rest of the year, I think.
No, I agree. The thing that I'm concerned about goes in line with the fouling is that it's just that you're running a really tight lineup of 8 players, and Alexis is 10 minutes, Dorn's 21 minutes. You're really kind of running 6 guys. Like when you get to Sisley at 21 minutes, it's your starting lineup and 6 guys, and you see this once you get Tucker. You saw that a little bit in the Marquette game. Tucker DeVries had a great game, but he also got in foul trouble, and then he was out in that game. Wilkerson stepped up, but it's like I could definitely see some Big Ten games where 2 of those guys get in foul trouble, and suddenly now you start to see the sand kind of show under the foundation, so to speak. And I think that's one of the issues this team is just going to have. It's just a very Coach DeVries likes to have a pretty tight lineup. I think it's also based on the team. It's just that's who he trusts, and that's what this team has. So I think those 2 things are going to go hand in hand. Is there's going to be games where you have bad officiating, this team gambles a little bit going for steals, and you're going to have some games where you just get some foul calls and guys are going to get in foul trouble, and we're going to see the bench starts to cause some issues. So I think that's another issue. But again, this is why I kind of go with that the golden retriever analogy. Is it's like I'm not expecting this team to win a Big Ten title. I'm not expecting this team to go clean at home. I'm expecting this team to be fun, be good, and it's like I'm expecting some moments of like, oof, that was a rough one. Like that retriever got in the mud. He came home and he went all over the white couch. Like that was not awesome. It's like, what do I expect? That's how I look at this. Is there's probably going to be some games that are head scratchers and that are going to be like, man, they shot bad, they played bad defense, and we got in foul trouble, and that was a lot of Ian Stevens. Not picking on anybody, but it's like but I think you just have to have that mentality and that kind of understanding going into it. But definitely the lack of bench outside of 2 or 3 guys, I think is going to be an issue this season.
Yeah, probably. But also, much like on the football side, we've discussed how nobody has depth anymore, except maybe Ohio State. There's just the depth all transferred somewhere else where it's getting playing time. I honestly think it's kind of the same with college basketball. There's very few teams that have legitimate depth. And the thing to keep in mind is Indiana still has pieces that have not gotten reintegrated into the team because they've been injured. Up to this point, they haven't had Ristich available.
Yeah.
They haven't had Drake available. Dorn is coming off of an injury and is clearly still not 100%. Like that's 3 players that I think could really make contributions for this team off the bench that we haven't seen yet, or at least not seen in their final form. So the depth piece may not even be as big of a piece as we think it is. And that's perhaps the most impressive thing so far about this Indiana team is that they've played well against some decent but not great, or even maybe even very good competition, but they've done what they've needed to do for the most part. And they are starting to demonstrate at a statistical level that they are among the best 20 or 30 teams in the country. And that's a really exciting thing. I think if you're an Indiana basketball fan, that's something that you should be celebrating.
Yep.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. I want to talk officiating. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of other IU basketball related items and then wrap this episode up. So stick with us here on Crimson Cast, part of the Back Home Network.
When the final buzzer sounds in Bloomington, the conversation starts here. The assembly call is IU basketball. Live post-game shows, smart midweek breakdowns, and no empty hot takes. Jared Morris, Coach Brian Tonsoni, Andy Bottoms, and Ryan Phillips dissect lineups, sets, and recruiting so you know what really happened and what it means for the Big Ten season, March, and beyond. Join the live chat on YouTube, then catch the podcast on Spotify and Apple. Just search Assembly Call and be part of Hoosier Nation's most trusted post-game tradition.
Scott, before we go on, just one thing. I did not check my email, which is bad of me, before I got on and started doing this show with you. But I was talking about Homefield Apparel. I didn't realize they had launched a new Old Oaken Bucket 66-0 commemorative tee.
Let's go.
This is amazing.
Wait, are they predicting this year's score? Is that say 2025?
No, this is from the Sogo game last year.
I know.
But they've got this in heavyweight, regular, and long sleeve tees. But I've got it up on screen here for those watching along on YouTube. That is outstanding. So I know what I'm doing immediately after we get off of the show here.
Here's what, if you win the lottery, here's what you can do. So you and I both went to a bunch of Pacers games last year. I saved all the t-shirts at every game, and I found someone on Etsy who turned them into a quilt. So I have this awesome quilt. Like, if you just win the lottery, you could just buy 30 of those t-shirts and make a quilt of nothing but the 66-0 t-shirt quilt of just Homefield Apparel. Just buy. I'm sure they'd love an order of 20 of the same shirt.
I dig that. That's good.
Yeah. And then just immediately cut them up and turn them into a quilt.
A couple of things that I wanted to follow up on here as we finish off. First of all, there's a problem in college sports, or college basketball in particular right now, and it is the officiating. Scott, you were at the Marquette game. I was only listening along on the radio. Can you describe to me the reactions to how that game was being officiated?
It was tight. They were calling a ton of fouls. That's what I remember the most from it. Was that it was just a lot of foul calls. I mean, it was like 10, both teams were in the double bonus.
I don't think I've ever heard Don Fisher more demonstratively opposed to the way that a game was being officiated than listening to him while I was, driving with that game going on. But last night had a similar problem, and this is not even necessarily a commentary on how Indiana's getting screwed by the officiating, because I honestly thought Kansas State got equally screwed by the officiating at times last night. There were some really questionable calls, but I think my biggest issue, more than individual questionable calls at this point, is just how much the flow of college basketball games gets destroyed by the way that the game is officiated these days. And this is not a new issue, although I feel it more keenly now that Indiana's actually got an offense that likes to go up and down the floor and get into a rhythm with shooting. It felt like at the beginning of yesterday's game, we were going to have a nice back and forth game. It might be a little chippy in places. And then there were multiple times during the game where the momentum just absolutely got janked by how the officials decided they were going to start calling it at that point. And then they just stopped calling it that way about 5 minutes later. And it's like, well, what did we go through all of that for in the first place? I understand officials have a rough job. We try not to overly criticize them on this show. I think we criticized them a lot more earlier on in the show, but we've tried to moderate that a bit. But just generally with college basketball, it just feels like somebody needs to say, look, we've got to get this under control, because this is a sport that is in a bit of a crisis moment, I think, in terms of its positioning on the national sports landscape. It's not as popular as it used to be, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But it's just not a great entertainment product. When you think about how it packages for television and even in person, there are good individual moments, but there's no flow. It doesn't feel like a consistent thing that you're sitting down and watching. The games stretch long because there's so many fouls, and it just feels like there's a better way to do it than how we've settled on doing it up to this point.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, it's and what was wild last night was there was a play where I think it was, I forget who it was for Kansas State, but he kind of did the little forearm Shea Gilgeous-Alexander move, and they called, or no, it was Connor Enright it was Conaway.
It's Conaway. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, and like tiny little arm bump, and they call the foul on that. And it's like, okay, so we're calling that. And then literally the next play, Kansas State comes back and does the exact same thing, and they don't call it. It's like, all right, like that, you've got to call this both ways. Or I would say just don't call that. Like, let's not start turning that into a foul, because that drives me nuts in the NBA. And I'm with you on the time. I mean, this was a game that went, 2-11, but that's only because at the end, both teams were kind of running the clock out. The last 8 or so minutes went really fast. Yeah. That's a college basketball game that if that was a tight game, that would have gone like 2:30, 2:45. It's like, that's way too long for a college basketball game.
And you add to that it got pushed, I think, 12 or 13 minutes past its tip time because of television, because the FS1 game that was preceding it wasn't ready to end. It just, I, I know that there's probably not a clear answer. A lot of this is points of emphasis, and oftentimes the officiating will really focus on the points of emphasis in the first month and then gradually taper off to where it's not calling the same things
Right.
calling earlier on in the season. But I don't know. I've got to believe that there's a way that you can officiate basketball that provides for a more even flow of the game. The Big Ten's always been the worst about this, and the Big Ten has oftentimes really damaged itself and its teams in tournament play because of how its games are called versus how games are called at the tournament level. They tend to be really, really hyper focused on calling fouls in Big Ten play, and then teams are not used to adapting to that when it comes to the tournament. Part of the problem here is, though, you've just I just don't think you're set up for success when you've got officials working 5 or 6 games in a row for multiple conferences with different rules and different ideas of how they want things called. You end up with a very disjointed product, a lot of inconsistency. Nobody can get comfortable with anything. And this is where the amount of money that exists in college sports, and I feel the same way about college football in a different way. Like, at some point, you've got to say, look, this is not just a part-time thing that people should be engaging in. Like, let's have professional referees, that this is their specific job. It doesn't fix everything. The NBA is definitely proof of that. But the flip side of it is there's got to be a better level of consistency than what you've been able to put out there. Whatever you do, please keep in mind that people watch these games. People are trying to get entertainment out of these games. And if you can't call the game effectively without turning it into a whistle fest in every single half, which is essentially what happens, you're damaging the product, and that is eventually going to make people less interested in watching the games, as well as making the people that are still interested very frustrated because they're not getting what they're bargaining for when it comes to the content. So that, I don't have a point to any of this.
No, but I want to highlight one thing that you said in there that you brought to my attention 2 or 3 years ago that I've now, like, I love talking to people about it and getting into it. If in Ken Pomeroy, if you go to the game, the officials are links you can click on. You can click on the officials. So I'm just going to pick Brian Dorsey from last night's game. Don't know who he is. This is his 18th game he's reffed this year. Since November 16th, which was last Sunday, which was 10 days ago, he has reffed in Columbus, Ohio on the 16th, Columbia, South Carolina on the 18th, Maryland, College Park, Maryland on the 19th, Boca Raton, Florida on the 20th, Gainesville on the 21st, Sioux Falls, South Dakota on the 22nd, Champaign, Illinois last night, and Bloomington this night. So in a matter of what, the 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, 24th, 25th, he went like in a 7-day span. He did 6 games in Maryland, Florida, South Dakota, Illinois, Indiana. Dude, you live down in Florida. If I told you, hey, Galen, in 3 days, you got to go from Boca Raton to Gainesville to Sioux Falls. And oh, by the way, in each day, I need you to also run for 3.5 straight hours while I'm going to have 10,000 people yelling at you. And then I need you to take a commercial flight to the next place.
Or drive in some cases.
Drive, yeah. But I mean, or by the way, I don't care. I'm not going to coordinate. Like, you're in charge of getting there. There's not going to be a plane. There's not going to be a car waiting for you. Like, it's the schedule these guys keep is absurd. And to your point, it's a bunch of different leagues. I mean, it's not all Big Ten games he's doing there. He's doing a bunch of different leagues, which all have different points of emphasis. This is, I keep parroting stuff that you say. You say it well. It's like, you got to know what business you're in. If you're the Big Ten, like, you're a professional business. The NBA has refs. They pay them, and they can dictate what happens. Like, the Big Ten is big enough now. Like, you are making as much as a mid-level Fortune 500 company. Hire your own refs. Make them full-time. Make it so that Brian Dorsey, if you want him, doesn't have to work 12 games in 13 days across 7 different states and do his own travel.
It might help. It
couldn't hurt from what we're seeing.
Hurt at this point. It's just, and part of the problem is college basketball is so huge. There's so many teams. There's so many leagues. And there's nobody in charge. There's no centralized model or no centralized group to run things, and it creates a lot of variability. But one of the consistent things that we see during the course of the season, and I'll note, we don't see it to the same level in the NCAA tournament. Like, officiating sometimes is a story in the NCAA tournament, but by and large, the officials seem to be given the instructions of not getting in the middle of games.
Right.
But we don't see that instruction happening in the regular seasons, and you absolutely see it on a regular basis. But the regular season is important. Like, this is important for the teams. It's important for the fans. I would just like to see something different, some different approach here.
It's something that I've said all the time as both an NBA fan who goes to a lot of NBA games and a college basketball fan. I'll go to 12 straight NBA games, and outside of like game 4 of the finals where I felt like Scott Foster got really involved, most NBA games, there's foul calls. It's like there's questions, there's reviews. There are people pissed about calls. It never feels like the refs become part of the story. Like, they make a call, it's like maybe a little kerfuffle, maybe not, but it's like it just happens, moving on, like boom, foul, like a little talk, moving on.
Unless it's game 4 of the NBA finals.
I think that's game 4 of the NBA finals. Then I will carve that out differently. We can just, God, I was at the game the other night and Scott Foster's reffing. It's like, back in the scene of the crime. Like, somebody yell at him, please, the whole game. Let's be pissed at Scott Foster. But no, most of the time, normal regular season NBA game, it's like the refs, you don't notice they're there. They call fouls. It happens. It moves on. Every college basketball game I'm at, it's like, oh, I'm now noticing the refs. Like, there's these moments where it's like, oh, there's the ref doing a ref thing, and I notice he's there and he's being demonstrative, or he's making a big call, or he's doing one thing on one side and one on, like, I'm always noticing the refs, and it shouldn't be that way. And the NBA is a prime example. You can go to a regular season game, watch the whole game, be like, oh, I didn't even realize there were refs out there.
Yeah. Anyway, that was most of what I wanted to talk about with IU basketball. Obviously, the schedule coming up, an interesting one. The Hoosiers have Bethune-Cookman.
We're playing the Big Ten next week. I know, it always gets me every time. It's like, God, Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Yeah. Bethune-Cookman this Saturday. That'll be the last real tune-up game before this stretch of very interesting games that are lying on the other side of it. Wednesday of next week, a week from today, they travel to the Barn to take on Minnesota. And then, of course, they've got Louisville at Gainbridge on Saturday the 6th. They have Penn State at home on the 9th of December, and then at Kentucky on the 13th. And then you're into finals week. You've got Chicago State, who's real bad. You've got Siena, who's decent Metro Atlantic team. And then the Big Ten starts later. It's a big break for Indiana between their last pre-New Year's game is the 22nd of December. They don't play again until the 4th of January, so there'll be a lot of rest-up time during that period. But should be an exciting next month or so with IU basketball, and I'm curious, as I know everybody is, to see how it looks when the rubber hits the road against the two teams from Kentucky.
I'm curious, that Louisville crowd, if you're going to be, it would already normally be a pro-Indiana crowd, but assuming, and I feel pretty good that will be a lot of fans will be there ready for the Big Ten title game that night. Is it like a very raucous 70% Indiana crowd?
I'm curious. I think it's hard to say because Louisville fans. I mean, this game, I bought tickets for this back in the summer. I bet Louisville fans did as well. Like, Louisville fans are going to be fired up for this team in this game. They're obviously very good.
Right.
And, so far undefeated. They beat Kentucky pretty decisively. They beat Cincinnati I guess it was last week. And they'll have a game at Arkansas on the 3rd of December leading into it. I mean, they could be undefeated and a top 10 team by the time this game rolls around. So I'm really curious how this, this matchup ends up working out in terms of how the fans are. I mean, the likelihood of Indiana having both a football and a basketball game going on in the city at the same time, I think is really going to drive up ticket prices and make things really fascinating. I am really curious what the atmosphere in Gainbridge is, though, because I mean, Louisville, don't sleep on them. That's the better of the two teams Indiana's going to play between Louisville and Kentucky. They're second in the country in offensive efficiency, and obviously last year they absolutely laid the lumber to Indiana, 89-61 down in Atlantis. So, and that was with a worse team offensively. So It's going to be a fascinating game, and I think it's going to be two really fired up fan bases, and I'm really curious to see what that environment looks like.
The other thing that I'll say, just looking ahead, we'll probably do a pod before them, but just keep this on your radar. That game against Kentucky in Rupp, there's a world where this is Mark Pope's last year, and I always say that because they've already lost to Louisville. They lost to Michigan State, which is kind of, a team they play a lot on a national level. If he then loses to Indiana at home and then loses to Arkansas on the road and Calipari, which is very likely, they didn't play Arkansas once. Like, if you're Mark Pope, it's not a great year to lose to Louisville, Indiana, and Calipari all the same year. And then, your one big game against Michigan State, you lose that, and they're going to play North Carolina and Gonzaga before we see them. I don't know, just like the triumvirate of Louisville, Indiana, and Calipari all being losses could just be enough to be like a, Ryan Day can't beat Michigan scenario where it's like, we like this guy, but dude, that's too much.
It's gonna be interesting to keep an eye on. Absolutely.
That's a hot seat.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, this is the best time. Yeah, let me put it this way. The times when Kentucky, Louisville, Indiana, Purdue are all good that's what we grew up with.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you throw in, I wish Cincinnati was better. Yeah. I wish Xavier was better. Like this particular pocket of basketball, when it's firing on all cylinders, is so much fun.
Yes.
But especially when it's Purdue, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, that was kind of the original group. That's what made the 80s so much fun with basketball. And rarely did you have think about the coaches you had in that mix. You had obviously Bob Knight, you had Gene Katie, you had Denny Crum,
who's also a character. Yeah.
Eddie Sutton, and then you had Rick Pitino. I mean, that cluster of coaches, it was rare when one would, be able to get the best of everybody. There was always somebody that kind of held the trump card for that particular year.
Yeah.
And then it would change to the next year. So it'd be cool if Pope, Kelsey, DeVries, Painter, if that group was able to lead kind of a renaissance of that. And I love the fact Indiana's playing Louisville in Gainbridge. Yeah. I love the fact that they're playing at Rupp. It brings back a lot of positive memories. And I feel like for the first time, Indiana's got a team where I'm not terrified of how they'll perform in those sorts of games, because we've just seen Indiana struggle more often than not, it feels like, when they're on that kind of a stage. I don't feel that way this year.
Agreed.
Maybe I could be proven wrong, but I just don't feel that way.
I feel like I wouldn't predict us to beat Louisville and Kentucky either, but it feels like we're going to have, again, back to the thing, it'll be fun, and I think they'll compete. Whereas previous years, like, I was concerned not only that we were going to lose, but that we were going to have massive egg on face on a national level. I don't think we're going to have that here. I think it'll be a game where it's like, man, we held our own, or we lost by 12. It kind of got away from us at the end there, but that was a fun game. Unlike, I think of that game you went to in Atlanta against Alabama, or Auburn, sorry, where it's just like, well, that sucked. Yeah. That wasn't good. There was nothing good about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that'll wrap it up for us on the show, at least this show. There might be another show later on today. Hopefully your travels are going well. Your family time is treating you as it should, and you're having a happy Thanksgiving whenever you're listening to this. For Scott, I'm Galen. This is Crimson Cast. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. Stay never daunted. So long, everybody.